My name is Lord Uzkek, and today we're going to go over some sort of a beginner guide to building your own or making your own builds for the Division 2. So there's this handy little app, which is or web app, which is a Division 2 build tool on GitHub, made by, probably fans of the game. Here's some credits here to some of the people who have participated in designing and making this and putting together all the values that you're going to see. So we're going to outline sort of how I go about making a build and the good things about using a web app like this. A lot of RPG or ARPG based games have fan bases that have made apps and systems that'll do the same sort of thing as this. So what we're going to do is outline some of the useful parts of using this app, sort of how to use it, and then we're going to go into how to sort of the steps I go through to making or designing a build. Obviously, designing a build on here and then testing it and having it actually work the way you want is completely kind of different. Sometimes builds will work exactly how you want them to, and sometimes they just don't. It's kind of it's a 50-50. Most of the time when I do things on here, or there's some weird thing I want to try out, it'll work out somewhat the way I want it to, whether it's sometimes it'll need altering, like more armor cores or more weapon damage, or vice versa. Different talents will work better than what I originally anticipate, but these are some of the things I want to go over anyway. So first of all, the highlights of using an app like this: when we click on, say, for example, we want to look at weapons. There is every weapon category. There's also all of the talents and named exotics and how the talents work. There's all of the named high-end items in every category. And there is also every base gun in the game. So the good thing about being able to use something like this, it's more than anything is just the information. It's really kind of difficult unless you have the gear in your inventory. It's really hard to find the information on exactly one specific thing. I often have this open, or at least in the background on my web browser, ready to pop open whenever I need to use it or check something. It's a really good tool. If we look at, for example, something like named gloves, right? So we got our exotic gloves here, and then we've got our named gloves. So what you may not notice is that each named glove or named item, including the ones that don't have talents, always come with a specific attribute that they're always going to have rolled perfectly. So if we were using, in one of my recent builds, I'm using the firm handshake. So it's a Sokolov item, but it's always going to roll with status effects 15%. So one of the attributes is always going to be that status effect at 15%. Now the cool thing about this is if you get this to drop and you want to use it in a build and you want to go through this app and make yourself a build where you want the values to be accurate. Say, don't know why, but you've got the Sokolov firm handshake as a skill. You've recalibrated it as skill tier. You've now got that set, or say you've recalibrated as armor, but you don't have your armor max, so you can change that value to say your armor's only 150,000. Now you have a accurate depiction of what you've actually got in your inventory. I personally like to just set it at the max so I can see the possibility of what a build can do, and then I make it, and then I will slowly up the attributes as I go. So, another cool thing about this, you've got below this, so you've got obviously all your exotics, all the talents that they work with, all the named items, the perfect clutch, the perfect combined arms, like all the perfect talents that they can run with, but you've also got all the gear sets. But not only do you have just the gear sets, but it also labels the chest talent, right? So now I've clicked on chest, I was in the backpacks. Now I'm in the chest gear. If I want to look at the chest talent of Foundry Bulwark, for example, it says here, not only does it have the talent Makeshift Repairs, whenever you or your shield take damage, 25% of that amount is repaired to both over 10 seconds. So it's got the 4-piece talent, but it also has written the chest piece talent. So improved materials, decreases time taken for makeshift repairs from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. So information wise, I found that finding the individual like chest and backpack talents that you get for certain gear sets is kind of hard. I think there's one spreadsheet I found, or 2 spreadsheets I found, that had all of the gear sets all written down with all the talents and what they do. But this is just so much easier to use, just to find everything you need to find. Like it's all here. You can select it all and do pretty much put together whatever sort of build you want. It takes a bit of playing around with, but in the long run, it's really handy. On this side here, it tells you, like, once you've put all your gear in, it tells you what your crit chance is based on your gear, what your overall weapon damage based on how many weapon cores you've got, your overall armor based on how many armor cores you've got, vice versa with literally everything. So everything that your gears give as bonuses, for example, total armor, will update here. So up the top, it'll give you your gear set and brand bonuses, including talents, all in a big list at the top. For example, if we put a few things in. So all of our gear set and brand bonuses are at the top. Very nice to be able to see them all in conjunction. And then on the graph below, it'll actually give us all the rounded up percentages of what these gear sets and brand sets are adding. So now we're going to go through how I go about making a build. So first things first, I try to figure out what the build is going to be used for, i.e. solo PvP, solo PvE, group PvE, or group PvP. So for solo PvP, you need probably something with a bit more survivability, something that you can dodge and weave and take out 2 to 3 people at a time in the Dark Zone. What I tend to go for mostly is solo PvE. As you may have noticed from the videos we've already uploaded, most of my builds are solo PvE orientated, but we tend to play as a group anyway. Then you've got group PvE. So you may have noticed in our most recent live stream, Josh was using a skill-based healer, which is pretty much designed not to do damage, but to pretty much just heal me and Kai while we do all the damage. And not only heal us, but also once we've been healed, he was also buffing our damage as well. So the first thing to do is really pick what sort of build you want to go for. Do you want to use it for PvP? Do you want to use it for PvE? No build really works for everything. Division 2 is just one of them games. So the next question you need to ask is, what do you want it to do? Do you want it to be a tank? Do you want it to be DPS? Do you want it to be a skill build with heaps of damage? Or do you want it to be a utility skill build causing heaps of status effects, or healing your other team, or buffing your other team? So based on what we want to do, I've got one together here in my other tab. So this here is a PvP build that I've somewhat put together. It's sort of, It's a crit damage build, mostly using the Vector because I don't have an Ouroboros yet. But it, rather than using, I think the meta tends to be Vengeance or what is that backpack? What's that backpack skill that everyone uses? Vigilance. A lot of people tend to use Vigilance for the weapon damage increase, but when you take damage it is disabled. So what this is doing is running Ridgeway's Pride, so when an enemy is within 15 meters we can apply a bleed to them. Now once that enemy is bleeding on the Vector, we are running Sadist, which means that we scroll down and find Sadist, which will be near the bottom. It's in alphabetical order. Amplifies weapon damage by 20% to bleeding enemies, and after 4 kills it applies bleed to the next enemy hit, but that doesn't really matter because we're applying bleeds anyway. And then on the Anarchist Cookbook we're rocking Perfectly Wicked. So rather than using Vigilance, this one is getting its damage from Sadist and Wicked. So how I sort of came up with this whole idea, I wanted to run a status effect build. So I picked the items or the talents that I liked that I wanted to use for the build. So at first it started off with I wanted to use Anarchist Cookbook, or at least the talent Wicked. Anarchist Cookbook is just a good item for it because it comes with 1 piece of Golem gear, gives us 10 status effects. So that's plus 10% increase to pretty much any status effect we apply, be it damage, duration, whatever. And it comes with Perfectly Wicked, which gives us more weapon damage for a longer period of time. So that was kind of a given, right? When I wanted to go Wicked, it was better to go the Anarchist Cookbook. I managed to get it to drop in the Dark Zone, so I'm rocking that at the moment. Now, what I wanted to do is build, obviously pop statuses on enemies and then be able to melt them. So a good way to do this is with the Jammer Pulse. So I use the Jammer Pulse to disrupt. So use the Jammer Pulse, it gives a disrupt status effect on an affected target. Now this is kind of a 2 positives in 1, right? Because it gives them the status effect, so we're doing more damage with the Wicked, but it also disrupts them from using any skills. So the Jammer Pulse is pretty much a win-win for this. And the only downside is that the Vector being Sadist isn't really getting a buff from it. So that's when we decided to rock the Ridgeway's Pride. So my main point here is when you're designing a build, find a weapon, a talent, an exotic, something to build the base of your build around. So it could be anything. It could be maybe you want to do a tank build and you want to use the tardigrade armor system. This one's probably good for a support, because when you or an ally's armor breaks, you gain 80% of your armor as bonus armor for 10 seconds. So this one's a really good one where you could pretty much just buff your team with a lot of armor and be like a very sort of out in the open tank, but like a utility tank. So you could do this with any gear you want in the game. I mean, there is so many options in this game. Like, I mean, you could do I've looked at doing all sorts of different builds. Like the ongoing directive is one I want to look at doing. I don't even know where it is. Ongoing directive. Killing a marked enemy grants a full clip of Hollow Point ammo. That's would be another fun status effect build to do. But it all, as I said, it all depends on what content you want to run, what sort of build you want to go for, and what item and what talents you want to use. So that is just about most of what this has to offer. The last thing I want to show you is, I mean, as you can see, this is our brand bonuses over here. But last part I want to show you is this. So down the bottom, once you have weapon selected, it'll show you pretty much all your weapon stats and weapon damage. You can toggle if you're rocking a crazy amount of headshots. You can toggle your headshot damage, and it'll show you your amount of damage per magazine. It'll show you your damages, like your total weapon damage overall. For me, I'm doing critical, so if I toggle my critical damage based on 60% of my total damage, it's giving me my critical hit damage per magazine is 12.4 million. So a really fun way to experiment with your builds. Definitely recommend having a look at this, and if you have an idea or you have that perfect piece that's dropped in game and you just want to stuff around with it but you don't have the gear in game to stuff around with it, this is a really good application to go through. I really hope this helps you guys, especially those new and coming back to the game, to really sort out what you want to do and what sort of builds you want to make, and depending on what content you want to go through. So if you liked this sort of video and you want to see more guides and beginner friendly sort of informative sort of videos, make sure to give us a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one.